It's funny how life can change in the blink of an eye. One moment, everything seems normal, and the next, you're thrown into a storm you never saw coming. For me, that storm hit on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in our neighborhood, Briarwood Hills. It wasn't a natural disaster or some big dramatic event. It was something far more ordinary, but equally devastating. The HOA, the very group of people who were supposed to ensure our community ran smoothly, almost took my son's life. My son, Lucas, is 7 years old and has cystic fibrosis. If you've ever seen someone with this condition, you know how difficult it is for them to breathe. Every breath is a battle, and every day is a challenge. That's why Lucas relies on an oxygen machine to help him get through the day. Without it, he's in serious trouble. We've always been careful about making sure his equipment works properly. We have backup plan generators, extra tanks, everything. But no amount of preparation could have saved us from what happened that day. The HOA decided to cut off electricity to certain houses in the neighborhood for routine maintenance. They didn't send any notices or warnings, nothing. Just flipped the switch and left us in the dark. When the power went out, Lucas's oxygen machine stopped working. At first, I thought it was just a glitch. I tried restarting it, checked the connections, and prayed it would kick back on, but nothing worked. The room grew eerily silent except for the sound of Lucas struggling to breathe. I'll never forget the panic that surged through me as I realized what was happening. His little body was gasping for air, his hands clutching at his chest, as though he was trying to pull oxygen out of thin air. My heart felt like it was being ripped apart. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hand shaking so badly I could barely press the numbers. I screamed at the operator, telling her my son was dying, begging her to hurry. By the time the paramedics arrived, Lucas had passed out. Watching them rush into our home, their faces grim as they worked to stabilize him, was the most terrifying moment of my life. They managed to revive him, but he was weak, pale, and completely unresponsive as they loaded him into the ambulance. I felt like my whole world was crumbling around me. How could this happen? Why didn't anyone warn us? Why didn't they care? Sitting in the hospital waiting room later that night, I couldn't stop replaying the events in my mind. The HOA hadn't just made a mistake, they'd acted without thinking about the consequences. To them, we weren't people, we were inconveniences, standing in the way of their schedules and rules. They didn't see a scared mother holding her dying child, they saw a house that needed maintenance. That's when something inside me shifted. Anger bubbled up, hot and fierce, but it wasn't just anger. It was determination. If they wouldn't value human life, then I would make sure they understood exactly what it felt like to lose control. I didn't know how I would do it yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let this go unanswered. They had taken away my son's ability to breathe, and now I was going to take away everything they held dear. In that cold, sterile hospital waiting room, a plan began to form. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. And I was ready to fight for it, no matter what it took. After that night in the hospital, I didn't sleep for days. My mind was racing with questions. How could they be so careless? How could they not see the harm they were causing? But more than anything, I was consumed by one thought. What could I do to make them understand? I wasn't looking for revenge just to hurt them. I wanted them to feel the same helplessness I had felt when Lucas was struggling to breathe. I wanted them to know what it was like to lose control of their lives. The first step was figuring out who these people were, the faces behind the decisions that almost cost my son his life. At first glance, the HOA seemed like a faceless machine, but I knew better. Someone had signed off on that power outage. Someone had decided it was okay to cut electricity without warning, and those someones lived right here in Briarwood Hills, walking among us like nothing had happened. I started paying closer attention to the HOA meetings, listening to the names mentioned, and watching how things worked. It didn't take long to learn that the board consisted of 5 members: Evelyn Barnes, her husband Rick, Carl Sanders, a retired lawyer, Patricia Johnson, a real estate agent, and Derek Williams, a young tech entrepreneur. They weren't just neighbors, they were landlords too. Many of them owned multiple properties in the neighborhood, renting them out to families like mine. That's when the idea hit me. If I wanted to strike back, I needed to hit them where it mattered most: their wallets. Property was their pride and joy, their source of income, their security blanket. What if I took that away from them? The thought scared me at first. I wasn't rich, and buying houses sounded impossible. But the more I thought about it, the more determined I became. If they could ruin lives with their rules, then I could turn their own system against them. But buying houses cost money, lots of it. My husband, Sean, and I weren't wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. We worked hard to provide for our family, living paycheck to paycheck like so many others. Still, desperation has a way of making you creative. I began selling everything we didn't absolutely need. First, it was small things, old furniture, clothes, kitchen gadgets. Then I moved on to bigger items, like jewelry I'd been saving for special occasions, and even our second car. Every penny went into a growing pile of cash hidden in a shoebox under my bed. When selling our stuff wasn't enough, I turned to loans. I maxed out credit cards, borrowed money from friends and family, and even dipped into savings accounts we'd set aside for emergencies. It felt reckless, like I was gambling with our future. But I kept reminding myself why I was doing this. This wasn't just about me. It was about Lucas, about protecting him and making sure no one else ever had to go through what we did. Once I had enough money to start, I focused on finding properties owned by the HOA members. I didn't want them to know it was me, least, not yet. So I worked quietly, using fake names and hiring lawyers to handle the transactions. The first house I bought belonged to Carl Sanders, the retired lawyer. It was a duplex he rented out to 2 families. When the sale went through, I waited a few days before showing up at his door with an eviction notice in hand. "Congratulations," I said with a tight smile as I handed him the paper. "You've officially been evicted." Carl looked at me like I was speaking another language. What are you talking about?" he stammered. "Oh, didn't you hear?" I replied sweetly. "Your tenants are moving out, effective immediately." He tried to argue, claiming there must be some mistake, but I just shrugged and walked away. Within weeks, Carl was scrambling to find new renters willing to deal with such short notice. Meanwhile, I rented the units myself at much higher rates to desperate families looking for a place to live. It was risky, maybe even a little cruel, but every move I made felt justified. This wasn't personal, it was business. And business, as the HOA had taught me, was ruthless.